Governments are increasingly injecting localized blockades directly into the Internet's foundational routing layers, and the consequences for global connectivity are severe. The motivations usually stem from legitimate policy goals, enforcing copyright, protecting national security, or stopping the spread of disinformation. But to achieve these goals, regulators are targeting the Internet's core connective tissue, DNS resolvers and IP routing protocols. The intention is a surgical strike to remove specific content. The engineering reality, however, is a cascading network failure. Weaponizing these routing tools rarely succeeds in actually erasing the target content from the web. Instead, it practically guarantees the fracturing of global network interoperability. This diagram of network nodes represents the Internet's core architecture. It functions purely as a neutral coordination and pathfinding system. Protocols like DNS and IP were engineered to maximize interoperability. They do not evaluate the data they carry. There is a strict functional difference between deleting data at its hosting source and breaking the map that points users to that data. Destroying the map does not delete the destination. The content itself remains entirely intact. Because precision is impossible at this infrastructure layer, attempting to use it for enforcement inevitably creates severe collateral damage. Forcing a pathfinding system to behave like a content moderator creates a deep architectural mismatch. This structural conflict between policy intent and engineering reality is the root cause of almost every major overblocking incident. To see how this breaks down in practice, we need to look at how the domain name system, or DNS, actually works. Its primary job is mapping human-readable domain names to machine-readable IP addresses. Think of the first half of the system, the authoritative name servers, as the Internet's static directory. The second half consists of recursive resolvers. These act as the active operator, querying the directory on behalf of your device. In a healthy, unobstructed query, the resolver checks the directory and seamlessly returns the exact IP address you asked for. But under a government-mandated DNS block, an authority forces the recursive resolver to intentionally drop requests for a specific domain. The structural flaw here is proportionality. DNS operates at the domain level. A mandate to block a single infringing image means the resolver has to sever access to the entire domain. And even after the resolver drops the query, the source content hasn't been touched. It is perfectly intact and accessible. DNS blocking only removes the local directory listing. When you apply that blunt mechanism to the complexities of modern web hosting, the stage is set for catastrophic overreach. That overreach becomes obvious when we shift from routing to modern web hosting, particularly cloud platforms and content delivery networks. A single IP address rarely maps to just one website anymore. Today, one IP often supports thousands of completely unrelated global services. This visualization of a server farm maps out how dense these shared hardware environments have become. Countless distinct applications and APIs sit side by side. If regulators order an IP-level block targeting a single bad actor hosted here, the network drops the connection to the entire hardware address. Severing access to that specific IP instantly cuts off access to all the thousands of lawful businesses and platforms sharing it. We saw this clearly when a U.S. domain seizure targeting moo.com accidentally eradicated over 84,000 lawful subdomains in a single stroke. Similar court-ordered IP blocks in Austria and Spain stroke cloud infrastructure, triggering massive, completely unintentional business outages. The economic fallout from this crossfire disproportionately impacts U.S. infrastructure providers and small businesses caught up in the dragnet. It creates immediate operational instability and deep confusion among users when neutral, everyday services suddenly vanish without explanation. Because of the extreme density of modern shared infrastructure, executing a precise, surgical enforcement at the network layer is a mathematical and technical impossibility. Furthermore, these blocks are remarkably fragile. Because the content remains online, even non-technical users easily bypass the restrictions. They simply switch to alternative global resolvers, navigate directly via the IP address, or turn on a VPN. To stop this evasion, governments often escalate. They deploy protocol interference to restrict encrypted connections entirely. This map highlights India, which, under its 2022 IT rules, mandated extreme data logging on VPNs and intermediaries, directly undermining established privacy tools. Faced with requirements that violated standard security norms, major U.S. tech companies were forced into a mass market exit. In Russia, the state relies on deep packet inspection and aggressive protocol blocking to control network infrastructure and silence dissent. The collateral effect of this interference is the breaking of essential authentication and encryption standards, like TLS, which secure everyday communications. Attempting to plug these evasion loopholes inevitably degrades the foundational security, trust, and privacy of the entire global network. When you scale these escalating national blockades to the geopolitical level, the ultimate long-term consequence is structural internet fragmentation. We are already seeing content access fragmentation, where users in different physical jurisdictions experience entirely different, heavily filtered versions of the web. But the far more dangerous threat is technical fragmentation. As nations introduce divergent DNS root zones and enforce conflicting security standards, they create completely incompatible internet maps. Initiatives in China and Russia are actively moving towards sovereign, isolated network architectures that operate detached from global coordination. The Internet Engineering Task Force has issued clear warnings about this exact scenario, the widespread breakdown of global rendezvous services. Treating a shared global internet like a series of isolated national firewalls inherently destroys its reliability, efficiency, and reach. The internet's pathfinding architecture simply cannot survive sustained network-level manipulation. For enforcement to be precise and proportional, it must be executed at the source host, where the data actually lives, not at the routing layer. Once censorship infrastructure is built, it consistently experiences mission creep, shifting from narrow policy enforcement to broad suppression. Moving forward, we need a global recommitment to the core principles of interoperability, open standards, and neutral infrastructure. Defending the open internet requires abandoning the illusion of control and aligning our policy enforcement with the immutable realities of structural network engineering.